This is Storybook Radio.
Jace Nolan's hands were rough, his back aching from another 12-hour shift at the auto shop. Grease stained his fingers, sweat clung to his skin, and yet his paycheck never seemed to stretch far enough. He had done everything right: overtime, double shifts, cutting corners on sleep and personal life, only to find himself forever stuck at the bottom. Some men were born lucky. Jace wasn't one of them. So, on a cold Thursday night, when he ducked into the Lexington Grand Hotel to escape the bitter wind and nurse a cheap drink, he wasn't expecting anything but a few minutes of peace. Instead, he met Mr. Bellamy. Bellamy was the kind of man who exuded wealth. His navy blue suit was immaculate, his shoes polished, his gold watch glinting under the dim lights. He watched Jace with a calm, knowing expression. "Rough day?" Bellamy asked, as Jace dropped into a worn leather chair near the fireplace. Jace let out a bitter chuckle. "Rough life." Bellamy smiled. "Then maybe it's time for a change." Jace scoffed. "Unless you got a suitcase full of money, I don't see how that's happening." Bellamy said nothing. Instead, he slid a sleek black briefcase across the table. Jace hesitated. "What's this?" "A solution." Jace frowned, cautiously unfastening the latches. His breath caught. Inside were stacks of crisp $100 bills, so neatly arranged it looked almost surreal. His heart pounded. "This is a joke, right?" Bellamy leaned in slightly. "The money is yours. The only condition is that you keep working. The harder you work, the fuller the briefcase gets. But the moment you slow down," he gestured lazily, "everything it has given you will disappear." Jace stared, waiting for the catch. But Bellamy simply stood, buttoned his jacket, and strode toward the exit. The briefcase remained. Jace hesitated for only a second before clutching the handle like a lifeline. At first, he didn't trust it. He pulled a few bills from the case, testing them at the gas station, the grocery store. They were real. The next morning, after finishing his shift at the shop, he opened the case again. It was fuller. His hands trembled. He worked harder the next day. Overtime, side gigs, anything. That night, the briefcase overflowed. Within weeks, he quit his job and launched his own car restoration business. He barely slept, but every deal, every late-night hustle multiplied the money. 3 months in, he moved into a penthouse apartment. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out over the city skyline. The air smelled of fresh leather and polished wood, a far cry from the stale, grease-laden scent of his old one-bedroom rental. He had signed the lease without hesitation, paying the full year in advance with crisp bills from the briefcase. The luxury unit came with marble countertops, imported European furniture, and a bathroom large enough to rival his entire childhood home. At night, he'd sip whiskey on the balcony, watching the city buzz beneath him, feeling like he had finally arrived. 6 months in, he bought a Lamborghini Huracan, a sleek black beast that roared to life with the press of a button. The first time he took it for a spin, the city streets blurred around him, the power of the machine vibrating through his fingertips. He had never owned anything this extravagant before. Every head turned as he sped past, the attention feeding his ego. Jace no longer felt invisible. Emily beamed at his side, her fingers tracing the smooth leather seats, her laughter warm against his ear as they cruised downtown. At dinner, she sat close to him, her hand resting possessively on his arm, as they dined at restaurants where the wine menu alone cost more than his old rent. "This is amazing," she had whispered one night, her eyes reflecting the golden chandelier lights. "I knew you had it in you." Jace smiled, savoring the way the waiter treated him like royalty, the way other men glanced enviously at the life he had built. He had won. Or so he thought. It happened on a Sunday. For the first time in nearly a year, Jace allowed himself to sleep in. No alarms, no meetings, no work. The silk sheets felt cool against his skin as he stretched lazily, a rare, peaceful moment settling over him. He had earned this. When he finally rolled out of bed and stepped onto the balcony, the city hummed as usual. But something felt off. His gaze drifted down to the driveway. His Lamborghini was gone. His heart pounded. He sprinted back inside, his bare feet slamming against the cold marble floor. His hands fumbled for the briefcase. He flipped it open. Empty. A sharp chill ran through him. He grabbed his phone, his fingers moving with urgency as he scrolled through his contacts. Emily. Her name wasn't there. No texts, no call history, no pictures of her in his gallery. It was like she had never existed. Jace's breath came in sharp gasps. His hands shook as he sprinted through the penthouse, expecting, no, hoping, this was just a bizarre dream. But then the walls flickered. The luxurious furniture shimmered, then blurred, as though someone had painted the room in watercolors and was now smudging the edges. The marble countertops cracked and vanished. The European furniture disintegrated into air. His penthouse was dissolving around him. Bellamy's words echoed in his skull. The moment you stop, everything it has given you will disappear. His knees nearly buckled. Jace lunged for his laptop. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he booked meetings, messaged clients, scheduled new deals. He forced himself back into motion, his pulse hammering like a war drum. That night, his hands trembled as he opened the briefcase. It was full again. His phone vibrated. Emily's name reappeared. A text came through. "Hey babe, dinner tonight?" Jace stumbled to the window. The Lamborghini sat in the driveway as if it had never been gone. His breathing was ragged. His mind reeled. It was real, but only as long as he kept moving. One night, Jace sat alone in his penthouse, the briefcase staring back at him like an open wound. His hands trembled. His body ached. He was so damn tired. Would he ever get back the life he had before? Would he ever have a home, a family, something real? Or was he doomed to be invisible unless he kept working? A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Thinking of quitting, kid." Jace's head snapped up. Bellamy stood near the window, adjusting his cufflinks, his face unreadable. Jace swallowed hard. If I slow down, if I take a break, will I ever have a life worth living? Bellamy tilted his head. That depends. What do you mean by a life? Jace's voice cracked. A home, a family, something real? Will I ever have that? Bellamy's smirk remained. Not if you stop. Jace's jaw clenched. So if I don't work, I stay invisible? No one remembers me? Bellamy let out a low chuckle. You still don't get it, do you? He stepped forward. You and your work are the same. You never existed outside of it. Jace's breath caught in his throat. Bellamy's eyes gleamed. The moment you stop, you don't just lose the money. You lose yourself. No one will know you were ever here. Jace's stomach twisted. Had he ever existed before the briefcase? Had Bellamy created him, just like the wealth? His hands hovered over the latch. If he let go, would he disappear too? His fingers trembled. He squeezed his eyes shut. And he grabbed his phone, booked another meeting, and scheduled another job. The briefcase filled again. Emily's name reappeared. His penthouse remained. Bellamy's smirk widened. Smart choice, kid. Then he was gone. Jace sat in silence, staring at the prison he had built for himself. Then, like every day before, he got back to work.